What's up, guys? It has been with Ben's election predictions, and today is going to be one of the most consequential days of the 2024 presidential election. It is the first presidential debate of the 2024 cycle between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Obviously, this is not the first time that they've met for a debate, and I'm going to cover this in the video. But in this video, I want to cover, why I think this debate will be important, what my predictions for the actual debate will be, who's going to win the debate. And then lastly, and I think most importantly, what the impact and what the implications are going to be for the broader race overall. Because as I've said in past videos, this race is extremely, extremely tight. So these high profile days and events can have outsized impact that they might not have in previous cycles. So the first thing that I want to cover is, because these two people have met before, is trying to predict what's going to happen in this debate. We can look back in time at the 2020 debate to kind of get some insight of how we think this is going to go. And so, and I actually do think the history here matters. I mean, you can look back at different presidential elections, and when they have different candidates and different circumstances and different contexts, it's hard to apply the same lessons forward. But I actually think because we have the same candidates, and we understand the impact that the debates had in 2020, we can take a lot of those lessons into 2024, though I think the impact is going to be a lot different. So, kind of going back to 2020, these debates were held by um, the Commission of Presidential Debates, and there's typically three debates, and they start much later in the cycle than they're starting now. And this time, both the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign decided to go outside of the traditional Commission on Presidential Debates, which is like a third party, nonpartisan group that makes the rules and everything. So the both Trump and Biden decided to have a debate with CNN, and CNN is making kind of their own rules um, that both the campaigns agreed to. But in 2020, there was only two presidential debates because the second one was canceled due to Trump having COVID, and both campaigns agreed to, not reschedule that debate. They thought it was fine to cancel it, otherwise it would have been on Zoom or a lot of other things. But looking at this first debate, typically the general rule of thumb is that debates typically do not matter that much, and typically I think the media kind of overhypes the actual impact that the debate will have. However, I do think 2020 was the exception here, and there's plenty of exceptions too. In 1960, with John F. Kennedy versus Richard Nixon. The people that watched it on TV thought John F. Kennedy won because Richard Nixon was sweating, but the people that listened to it on the radio thought that Richard Nixon won just because they weren't able to see the perspiration or the sweat or looking nervous. And obviously there was a lot of factors, and that was a very close election. But a lot of people in hindsight attribute the first presidential debate and John F. Kennedy, looking more attractive and being kind of more charismatic in a visual sense as helping him win that election. And in 1980, a lot of people credit, Ronald Reagan's debate performance as um, helping him win the debate. Bill Clinton was a great debater. People even say George W. Bush versus Al Gore. George W. Bush was just kind of a more likable guy. Obama was a great debater, and it's you can look at these things in hindsight, and it's much more than debate. It's about charisma too. But it was interesting because I think in 2020, you think of Donald Trump as being the more charismatic candidate, but it is pretty agreed, I think, from people on both sides that Biden actually won the debate in 2020. And so yeah, and like obviously I do think these polls maybe can be a little bit more biased towards the Democrats, and I think we saw this in the 2016 cycle when Hillary Clinton won all three debates. When I think in hindsight, people might say it was a little bit more even, but we can see even compared to the third debate that a lot more debate viewers thought Biden won this debate compared to Trump, and both sides pretty much agree that Trump was too aggressive. He was interrupting Biden. He was kind of, really raising his voice, not letting him speak, doing a lot of personal insults, going after Hunter Biden a lot, his son. And I think a lot of people, just really felt bad for Joe Biden. They saw him as his grandpa, and like they were just like, this jerk guy Trump, keeps on interrupting him, so that Biden couldn't get a word in. And, you know, in the 2020 cycle when I was doing these YouTube videos, this is actually what I was saying that I thought would happen in anticipation, because the Republicans were, before the debate, were setting the bar so low for Biden. And this also happened in the State of the Union this year, where people anticipated Biden doing really poorly and Trump winning the debate. So when that didn't happen, and Trump overplayed his hand, and Biden was able to do fine. He didn't stutter or stammer, like have any really bad moments. Um the narrative was that Biden outperformed expectations, and you we've seen a little bit now that the Republicans aren't as much trying to set the expectations as low going into 2024. And Trump on a podcast even said that Biden is a skilled debater and beat Paul Ryan in the 2012 vice presidential debate, so almost trying to raise his expectations, because I think the Republicans realize that after Biden's, pretty good State of the Union, if you're looking at it from a sense of like, was he able to rally his base, and was he able to get through it, despite his older age, that it did kind of backfire on the Republicans because he outperformed expectations. However, in 2020, when we look at the betting odds, I think the expectations were that, okay, Trump's been down a lot for the cycle, but this debate, it's really going to show people that, you know, Trump is a more strong leader, and he can handle COVID, while just Biden isn't capable of that. You would hear that narrative in the right wing media a lot. But what we actually saw, and this debate was held on September 29th, is that right after this debate happened, Trump's betting odds plummeted, and you could actually just see the day of. And I think a lot of this can be contributed to the debate, just because a lot of people thought Trump that would win the debate, but he didn't. And this is one of the biggest moments where you saw things, flip. And obviously, like polls pre and post debate, there's going to be a lot of factors, and you aren't going to get a lot of clarity there just because you have different polls, and you might have some outliers. But the betting odds shifted a lot, and I think it's because this was probably the most watched debate of all time. I think technically the ratings were lower than what it was in 2016 and 1980, but you had a lot of people live streaming the debate and watching it on other forms that aren't going to be tracked in the traditional ratings. Um, and I think it had a massive impact. And you saw in the third debate that Trump probably did better in, that, fewer people watched it. And, there was Thursday night football on, but the first debate's gonna matter, and I think going into 2024, so we have Trump being favored, so I think that the biggest predictor on who is gonna win the debate is gonna be, how these betting odds shift. And, I do expect there to be some volatility here because this is gonna be a very tuned in event, like many people are going to tune in. Um, However, that being said, do I think it's going to have as dramatic of an impact as it did in 2020 when we saw the betting odds kind of go off a cliff for Trump after this happened? I don't think so. I think this is actually going to be higher risk for Biden, um, because Biden is 4 years older than he was 4 years ago when he was able to get through the debate pretty well, and I think, Biden's debate prep, the fact that he's been at Camp David for the past 7 days and doing nothing else kind of shows that, he's taking this very seriously, but also he feels the, need to, kinda go to these drastic measures and clear his entire schedule to prepare for it because he is getting older, and I think there's some recognition there. So my predictions on kind of where these betting odds are going to go, which would kind of be a proxy of where the where the debate is I frankly think it's going to be pretty flat. I think what you're going to see, I think Biden will maybe slip up a couple times. I think Trump is going to learn from his mistakes in 2020 and is not going to come in as hot. And I think the ratings are not gonna be quite as high as 2020 because I think in 2020 people were super engaged, which is why turnout was really high, and I also think turnout's gonna be lower in 2024. Um, but yeah, and, I maybe hype this up a lot. I don't think the presidential debate's gonna have a massive impact. It's a lot earlier in the, cycle, and I also think that it's not gonna move the needle that much. I don't think that there's a huge swath of persuadable voters. I can kind of anticipate, what the candidates are gonna say. Trump's gonna say when it comes to Ukraine and Israel that none of this would have happened if he were president, that inflation wouldn't have happened when he was president, and that, when the 4 years that he was president, the country was better in terms of an economic perspective, and um, I think that's kind of going to be his go-to. He's probably going to repeat that over and over again in many ways, and I think Biden's going to stick to his talking points. Talk about January 6th. He's going to talk about abortion, and he might try to undermine some things like talking about how he's trying to do some things on the border or some other things. And, I think Trump will probably I think if anything happens, Trump might win the debate, quote unquote, like that might be the narrative afterwards. But I actually don't think it's gonna move the betting odds that much, just because I think people are so polarized. So the last couple things that I want to touch on are the rules for the CNN presidential debate because this is unique in that they're not going through the traditional commission on presidential debates. I think the fact that there's breaks is not going to impact either candidate positively either way. Maybe you could argue if you think Trump has more stamina that this might actually help Biden because he can have a break. No opening statements. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. You could maybe argue that uh, it's going to keep people on their toes more because they can prep less. Um, which I think clearly Biden I think is going to prep more for this debate. So things that don't require as much prep could advantage Trump slightly. Muted microphones, a lot of people thought that they were doing this in response to, Trump interrupting Biden in 2020, which is probably true. And I think this was something that probably Biden wanted. But I actually think, and others have said this, is that it could help Trump actually not be perceived as being as aggressive or as mean to Biden. And so even if Trump is trying to talk, the audience is not going to pick up on that. And like it could help. I also think Trump has kind of learned his lesson and is not going to be as aggressive, which is going to help him. Also, no notes. I think this is pretty standard. And I, you know, uh, I think they might jot some things down at the beginning of the debate to try to recall some of their debate prep, but it's pretty standard. And no live audience. I personally think this is actually good because you aren't going to get any bias from the crowd, like cheering or any reactions. I actually don't know who this helps more, because if the audience is stacked either way, I actually think this makes it more fair. So I like this. And then the last thing that I want to cover is just some quick odds right here. So the debate winner. So this is the poll that done like the CNN poll, and I think part of the reason why Joe Biden's favored in this is because the CNN poll typically um, tends to kind of, I think, be biased towards the Democrats, which is why Hillary Clinton won all three times in 2016. Um, so I understand these odds. I still think I like Donald Trump at plus 140. Um, just because he's up in the overall polls now too, and I like taking the underdog. Um, it's interesting these prop bets right here. I don't think I would take this one, Trump to have at least one monologue lasting over 5 minutes. I don't know if they'll be allowed to speak for that long. So I think that's an interesting prop bet that I definitely would not take. Um, I would not take this one. First 10 minutes, I don't think that's going to happen. Trump to announce his vice president during the debate. I might actually take this because there's been a lot of reports that he might do this, and I think plus 1,000 odds would probably be pretty good. These are just kind of dumb, I think. Number of times Trump says stolen or rigged. I think these odds are probably right that it's probably going to be under 9.5. I think he's going to be trained not to bring up the 2020 election being stolen or rigged, even though he has said this at his rallies. Trump is going to get a lot of prep, and I think he is going to listen. So let's see. He's probably going to say, yeah, a nation in decline. You know, I don't know if he's going to say too big to rig. This seems more like a rally thing. He's probably going to be prepped not to say this. Inflation, like some of these phrases, I think he might not say exactly. Like indemnify all police officers, I probably wouldn't bet on this. Let me look at kind of the um destroy the oil industry at plus 2,000 at plus 200. I could see that. Um, shut the border down. I could see that. Drill, drill, drill. I mean, that seems like really good odds right there. He does say that a lot. Um, some of this stuff is kind of dumb, but I think my favorite bet here is drill, drill, drill at plus 1,000. And then Biden's buzzwords. I think abortion rights. Um, election denier plus 3,000. Um, yeah. So there you have it. I hope this has been really informative. And I really hope you tune in. Well, I don't think the ratings are like as many people will watch as it was in 2020. just because this is earlier. People are in the summer, people are less engaged. Um, I do think it will have an impact, albeit smaller than our 2020. So please let me know what you think is going to happen in this debate. Comment, like, subscribe, and I will definitely try to do a post debate a analysis after it happens. So definitely try to tune into that as well. Thank you guys.